You're listening to classic car radio. If you want some quiet thoughts in the background, you're in the right place. There are plenty of complicated ways to feel better in life. Meditation apps, cold plunges, inspirational quotes from people who definitely wake up earlier than you. But there's one mood booster nobody talks about, mostly because the people who know are too busy trying to find parts on eBay, the classic car. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can something built in the 70s with the structural integrity of a sandwich and the reliability of a French electrical system improve your mood? Well, let me give you three very solid, very scientific reasons, or at least three reasons that work for me. Reason one, classic cars make you feel like the main character. Drive a modern car and you're basically piloting a dishwasher with headlights. Drive a classic and suddenly you're starring in your own film. A Citroën DS makes you feel like a time-travelling diplomat. A Triumph TR6 convinces you you're more charming than you actually are. And a Porsche 928, well, that just makes you feel like you should have a yacht, even if the closest thing you actually have is a kayak from Decathlon. There's something magical about the way old cars look, smell, and sound. They give you instant character development. Even your bad hair days look intentional when you're climbing out of a 1970s Alfa Romeo. Reason 2, classic cars force you to slow down, and slowing down feels good. It's impossible to be stressed while driving a Morris Minor. The car simply won't allow it. Try rushing and it will respond by quietly shaking its head and possibly removing a piece of itself in protest. Modern cars make everything too easy. Half the time you don't even feel like you're driving, you're supervising. But an old car demands your attention in a way that pulls you out of your head and into the moment. You have to listen, feel, and occasionally bargain with it. And in that process, everything else, deadlines, notifications, the existential dread of why did Sharon schedule another meeting, fades away. It's mechanical mindfulness, but with better smells. Reason 3, classic cars create tiny adventures. Without even trying, you don't take a classic out just to buy milk. You take it out because maybe the sun is out, maybe you finished work early, or maybe you're feeling particularly brave and want to see if the old electrics are in a cooperative mood. Even a simple 5-mile drive becomes a story. Maybe you meet someone at the petrol station who used to own the exact same MGB, but in mustard yellow. Maybe someone gives you a thumbs up, which counts as more social interaction than you usually get in a week. Or maybe, just maybe, everything works perfectly, and you spend the whole journey grinning like a child because your 40-year-old Volvo hasn't made a single alarming noise. Classic cars transform the ordinary into the slightly ridiculous, the slightly magical, and the definitely memorable. And that's good for the soul. So yes, they break, they leak, they squeak, and occasionally they demand rituals you can't explain to normal people. But they'll also lift your mood faster than any wellness practice I've ever tried. Because when you're behind the wheel of something old, whether it's a Beetle, a Jag, or some questionable French masterpiece held together by enthusiasm and rust, the world feels lighter. You feel lighter, and sometimes that's all the therapy you need. There are many wonderful things about owning a British classic car. The charm, the history, the way strangers nod approvingly at you in car parks, as if you've done something noble for your country. But before you buy one, there are a few things people tend not to mention, not because they're trying to hide them, more because British classic owners have accepted their fate and no longer see anything unusual about it. So here are 3 things nobody tells you, but probably should. Number 1, you will smell permanently of petrol. This is not a metaphor, it's a lifestyle. Somewhere, deep inside the soul of a British classic, Whether it's an old MGB, a Triumph Spitfire, or a slightly too confident Jaguar XJ6, there is a faint but persistent desire to perfume its owner. You step out of the car after a lovely drive, take a deep breath, and there it is, that unmistakable blend of petrol, old leather, and maybe the ghost of a previous owner's pipe smoke. You'll think you've imagined it. Your friends will assure you that you haven't, and eventually you'll stop trying to get rid of the smell and simply accept that it's part of your personal brand. Number 2, electrical issues are a bonding exercise. Some people say the British invented romance. I say they invented character, building wiring looms. If you own anything with the words Lucas anywhere near it, you're not just a driver, you're in a long-term relationship with the Prince of Darkness himself. One day the indicators work, the next day they're on a spiritual retreat. Your headlights may or may not join you. But here's the thing, every time you fix something, or jiggle a connector, or threaten the car with a multimeter, you feel genuinely proud. Modern cars don't give you that. They give you error codes and judgment. A classic gives you opportunities for personal growth. And number 3, the real thrill isn't the driving, it's the starting. Every British classic owner knows that sacred moment. You sit down, turn the key, and hold your breath. Will it fire up instantly, like an enthusiastic Austin Mini on a sunny day? Or will it cough, think about life, and then decide that today is not the day? That moment, that glorious, unpredictable, slightly anxious moment, is the true heartbeat of British motoring. When it does start, you feel victorious. When it doesn't, you shrug because you've packed tools. You always pack tools. You could be going to the shops for milk, and you'll have a toolkit in the boot, just in case your Triumph decides it fancies a roadside picnic. But here's the secret. These 3 things point to British classics aren't perfect, and we don't want them to be. The little quirks, the smells, the gremlins, they're all part of a relationship that feels alive. Modern cars do everything flawlessly, and somehow that's less interesting. A classic gives you stories, it gives you character, it gives you a mild but constant sense of adventure. So yes, nobody tells you these 3 things, but once you've lived with a British classic, you wouldn't trade them for anything, except maybe a lift home when the starter motor gives up. There's a funny thing that happens when you spend time with an old car. You start off thinking you're the one looking after it, keeping it running, coaxing it through its quirks, forgiving it for the odd rattle or drip. But eventually you realise something else is going on. The car is teaching you something too. And one of its favourite lessons is this: slow down. Classic cars don't rush. They can't. They were born in a time before instant everything, before touch screens, notifications, and the strange modern belief that faster is always better. When you drive an old machine, you feel that difference immediately. There's a certain unhurried rhythm to the way it warms up, wakes up, and decides whether it's in the mood to cooperate today. And if you try to push it, it will remind you, gently or not, that patience is part of the deal. What's surprising is how quickly that patience becomes a pleasure, because when you're in a classic, you're not just travelling through space, you're travelling through time, you're driving something built with hands, not algorithms. You start listening more closely to the engine, noticing small changes, paying attention to the behaviour of the gearbox or the weight of the steering. Without even realising it, you drop out of the mental rush of the day and into something far more grounded. It's a bit like a moving meditation, not the sit cross-legged on a cushion type, but the sort where your attention is anchored to the sound, the feel, the moment right in front of you. You can't drive a classic car while doom scrolling or worrying about 10 different emails. It demands your presence, and that presence becomes a kind of refuge. There's also a humility to it. Classic cars have no interest in your schedule. They don't care about the meeting you're late for or the message you haven't answered. They operate on their own timeline with their own temperament. And once you accept that, life gets a bit lighter. You stop fighting the clock. You stop trying to force everything. You breathe a little more. And in that space, you rediscover something modern life quietly stole. The simple joy of driving for its own sake. A slow cruise, a long corner taken with care. The sensation of being connected to a machine that asks you to participate, not just sit there. It reminds you that moving slowly isn't the opposite of progress. Sometimes it's the only way to feel where you're actually going. So yes, old cars break and fuss and throw the occasional tantrum, but along the way they also teach us how to let go, how to pay attention, and how to enjoy the journey instead of sprinting from one destination to the next. In their own stubborn, charming way, classic cars show us a truth we tend to forget. You don't have to live fast to live well. Sometimes the best moments are found in the slow lane. You know, whenever I'm around classic cars, I'm struck by this quiet realization. Every old engine you see has lived more life than most of us ever stop to notice. We look at these machines as objects, as hobbies, as projects to fix on a Sunday. But somewhere in the metal, in the noise, in the wear and tear, there are stories tucked away. Sometimes I think that's what draws us to them, not the horsepower or the rarity, but the history that hums beneath the surface. Think about it, every engine misfire was once a moment of worry for someone. Every smooth pull-through second gear was once a burst of pride. That gentle tick on the overrun, someone else heard it long before you did. They wondered what it meant. They listened closely to the rhythm, just like you do now. Old engines collect people. They collect the hands that worked on them, the families that drove in them, the places they broke down, and the journeys they carried us through. A car that's 40 or 50 years old isn't just running on fuel, it's running on memory, all that maintenance and tinkering we do. Sometimes I think we're not restoring machines, we're restoring moments that would otherwise be forgotten. And the funny thing is, the parts that frustrate us the most are the ones with the richest stories. That stubborn bolt that refuses to move. Someone else fought with it in '84. That strange rattle that appears only on left turns. It probably annoyed 3 different owners before you. You're part of a lineage now, a caretaker in a long line of caretakers. The beauty of an old engine isn't in how perfect it runs. It's in the traces of life you can feel when it fires up. That first cough on a cold morning, the little shake as it settles into idle, the deep breath before it comes alive. It's like the car is remembering itself. You're not just starting an engine, you're waking up a piece of the past. And maybe that's the real magic. Modern cars are incredible, but they don't have that connection. They haven't had time to gather a soul. A classic car has lived through decades of roads, weather, mistakes, triumphs. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the stories, the long trips, the late night drives, the arguments, the laughter, the music on the radio that hasn't played in years. An old engine teaches you to pay attention, to feel instead of calculate, to notice the small things, the way the throttle responds, the smell of warm oil, the shift in tone when the revs rise. There's nothing digital to smooth it out, nothing artificial to hide the imperfections. It's honest, it tells you exactly how it feels, for better or worse. And in a world full of polished surfaces and perfect feedback, that honesty is refreshing. So next time you start up an old car, pause for just a moment. Listen to the churn, the catch, the first breath it takes. That sound has echoed across time. It connected someone's past to your present, and one day it'll become part of someone else's story too, because engines may be made of metal, but the lives they carry, those are made of us, and every one of those lives leaves a little trace behind, tucked somewhere deep inside the noise, waiting for you to hear it. There was a time when people used to go out for a drive for no reason at all. No errands, no deadlines, no navigation voice telling you to turn left in 300 yards. Just the simple joy of moving through the world with no particular destination. We've forgotten that a little. Modern driving is all efficiency now. Fastest route, least traffic, minimal time wasted. But somewhere along the way, we traded away the small pleasure of wandering, the feeling of taking the long road simply because it felt nicer under the tyres, the quiet moment when it's just you, the engine, and a bit of open sky. Classic cars remind you of that. They don't rush, they don't multitask, they're happiest when you're not trying to get anywhere quickly. In a strange way, they teach you to enjoy being unproductive, to savour the bends, the sounds, even the imperfections. And maybe that's why they still pull us in. Not because they're fast or convenient, but because they invite us back into a way of driving that feels almost forgotten, a way of being really slower, more attentive, a little more human. Every now and then it's worth taking a drive with no purpose, except the drive itself. No plan, no hurry, just the road unfolding at its own gentle pace. The lost art of driving for pleasure isn't lost at all. It's just waiting for us to remember. There's a certain philosophy that only really reveals itself when you spend enough time with a classic car. You don't notice it at first. At first, you're too busy wondering if that noise is normal, or if that smell is new, or if the fuel gauge is lying to you again. But give it a little time, and you start learning something deeper, something you won't find in any manual or workshop guide. Classic cars teach you about the slow lane, not the motorway slow lane. Although, let's be honest, with some classics you're going to be spending a lot of time there too. I mean the slow lane as a way of moving through life, a way of letting things unfold at their own pace, instead of trying to drag them forward like a reluctant alternator bolt. Because classic cars don't do rushing. They don't care how busy you are today. They don't care that you're late for dinner. They live in a world where warming up takes as long as warming up takes. You turn the key, the engine coughs, clears its throat, considers its options, and eventually decides, fine, I'll run today, but only because you asked nicely. And that's where the philosophy begins. In a modern car, you press a button and go. In a classic, you prepare to go. You listen, you pay attention, you learn its moods, you adapt, and somewhere in the middle of that dance, you start realizing how rarely you give anything your full attention anymore. You can't multitask in a classic car. You can't check your phone, adjust a playlist, and send a quick message while flying down the road. The car will simply not allow such nonsense. It asks you, politely, firmly, and occasionally with steam, to be present, hands on the wheel, ears tuned in, eyes on the world, and surprisingly, it feels good. Suddenly you're not rushing, you're not chasing time, you're just there in a moving piece of history, in a moment that can't be hurried. Life stops being a sprint and becomes a gentle roll. Classic cars also teach humility, because nothing reminds you that you're not in control, like a machine built in an era when weatherproofing meant try not to drive in the rain. You can have the perfect plan for the day and your car will respond with, that's adorable. But today we're learning about patience instead. Yet, weirdly, that's where the joy comes from. Not in the breakdowns themselves, we don't have to pretend those are spiritual experiences, but in the way they nudge you into letting go. You can't be in the fast lane when the universe, through your carburetor, is gently suggesting you slow the hell down. And then there's the driving itself, the unhurried steering, the engine note that actually changes when you listen to it. The road you start noticing because you're not flying over it at the speed of regret. Classic cars remind us that slowness isn't laziness, it's clarity. Slowness lets you see the world instead of blur past it. Slowness lets you notice the small things. Slowness makes the journey matter. So yes, Old cars leak, squeak, rattle, sulk, and occasionally set fire to themselves, but they also carry a quiet wisdom, a philosophy, a reminder that not everything in life needs to be done faster. Sometimes the best way to get where you're going is to ease into the slow lane, breathe, and let the ride unfold at its own charming, slightly unpredictable pace. You know, people often assume classic car ownership is all glamour and sunny Sunday drives, but anyone who actually owns one knows the truth. It's a spiritual practice, a moving meditation, a slightly oily path to enlightenment, because the first thing a classic car teaches you is patience. Nothing happens quickly, not warming up, not fixing things, not waiting for that part that was in stock last week. You learn to slow down, breathe, and accept that the universe occasionally manifests itself in the form of a seized bolt. And then there's awareness. Modern cars let you drift through a journey half asleep. A classic won't let you get away with that. It whispers, nudges, complains, celebrates. You start listening deeply to the engine note, to the vibration in the pedal, to that tiny new squeak you swear wasn't there yesterday. It's the automotive version of mindfulness, staying present, paying attention, noticing the moment before it becomes a problem. There's humility too. Classic cars do not care about your schedule, your plans, or your ego. They will embarrass you at petrol stations. They will refuse to start when you're trying to impress someone. They remind you gently, occasionally, not so gently, that control is an illusion, and somehow that's freeing. But the real zen is in the relationship, because it is a relationship. You invest time, care, curiosity. The car gives you stories, sensations, a kind of companionship. You begin to appreciate the effort over the outcome, the drive over the destination. You savor the journey because you have to. You can't rush it. And that slowness becomes a gift. So yes, classic car ownership can be frustrating. It can test your patience, your wallet, your sense of humour, but it also teaches presence. It rewards attention. It turns everyday drives into something richer, more textured, more human. And maybe that's the point. In a world running at full speed, a classic car pulls you back into the moment and says, "Here, be here. Feel this. Enjoy the ride." There's something classic car owners don't tell you. Well, a few things, actually. Things you only learn once you've lived with one of these old machines, long enough for it to test your patience, your wallet, and sometimes your sanity. First, let's get this out of the way. You will smell like petrol, not in a poetic motorsport heritage way. More like, why does my jacket smell like a carburetor again? It just happens. It's part of the lifestyle you stop noticing, other people don't. And then there's the moment, every classic owner knows it. You get into the car, turn the key, and there's this tiny pause where you hold your breath and think, come on, please behave today. That split second where time slows down and you brace yourself for either bliss or character building. We don't talk about that moment, but we all live it. And here's another one. Owning a classic car means accepting that strangers will talk to you. At petrol stations, in car parks, at traffic lights, you become a magnet for conversations that start with, "My uncle had one of these," or "I remember these when I was young." You learn to smile, nod, and enjoy it, because that connection is part of the joy. We also don't mention how emotionally invested we get in the smallest things: a new rattle, immediate heartbreak, a smooth run with no issues, instant euphoria, a sunny day. You're pulling the car out whether you had plans or not. Classic ownership turns adults into hopeful children. Every drive is Christmas morning, But here's the biggest thing classic car owners don't tell you. We don't actually own these cars. Not really. We're just the current caretakers. These machines have outlived owners, mechanics, fashions, governments, entire eras. And somehow they're still here, bending time a little bit every time they start up. We get to be part of that story for a while, a tiny part of a journey that started long before us and will probably continue long after we're gone. See, the secret isn't in the horsepower or the shine of the paint or even the drive itself. It's in the feeling, the sense that you're touching history with your hands, hearing it through the engine, carrying it across roads. It's travelled before. Classic car owners don't tell you these things because, well, it sounds sentimental. And we like to pretend we're here for the engineering and the performance. But really, we're here for the connection, the stories, the nostalgia, the moments when a machine feels almost alive. So if you've ever wondered why people put up with the quirks, the smells, the conversations at petrol stations, the unpredictable starts, it's because these cars give us something modern life rarely does anymore. A reason to slow down, to pay attention, to care about something that isn't disposable. And that's why, despite everything we don't tell you, we wouldn't trade this madness for anything. You know, sometimes I wonder why we still bother with these old machines. They're slower, heavier, fussier, and occasionally leak their feelings on the driveway. And yet, somehow, they still matter, because every classic car invites you into a different pace of life. A pace where you're not fighting the clock, the emails, or the 10,000 urgent notifications. You're just driving, listening, feeling. Modern cars remove a lot of that. They're brilliant, of course, fast, safe, quiet, but they also insulate us from the world. A classic car, on the other hand, refuses to let you stay on autopilot. Here, you have to be awake, present. You have to listen for that tiny rattle that wasn't there yesterday. You have to feel the road through the wheel, the way the car leans, breathes, settles. It's an experience, not a commute. And that's the strange magic of these old things. They offer something modern life keeps forgetting. Connection. Connection to the machine. Connection to the moment. Connection to a world where things had weight, smell, texture, and didn't all depend on software updates. Classic cars also bring people together. You never see strangers gathering around a 3-year-old crossover in a car park, but a 40-year-old saloon. That's an invitation. Stories start, memories surface. Everyone has a face, and maybe that's why they still matter. Because they remind us that life isn't just about efficiency. It's not always about getting somewhere as fast as possible. Sometimes it's about feeling the journey again. These cars are rolling pieces of history, yes, but they're also reminders. Reminders to slow down, to pay attention, to enjoy the simple things. So why do classic cars still matter in a modern world? Maybe because, in a world trying to rush us, they're one of the few things that gently ask us to take our time. You're listening to Classic Car Radio. If you want some quiet thoughts in the background, you're in the right place. There's something magical about driving an old car, and I don't mean the will it start today suspense, although that does add a certain flavour to life. I mean the way an old car quietly pulls you out of the frantic, high-speed, high-stress rhythm of modern living and drops you into a world where everything moves just a little differently. Modern life wants you to hurry, messages ping, deadlines loom, your phone vibrates like it's trying to escape your pocket. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you're expected to be productive, healthy, friendly, well hydrated, and apparently making passive income in your sleep. Then you get into an old car, and it reminds you that none of that matters for a little while. Old cars are wonderfully unapologetic about their pace. They don't sprint off the line. They don't have 8 driving modes. They don't pretend to be a spaceship. They just go in their own time, with a certain dignity, and occasionally with a smell you can't identify but have learned not to worry about. And that slowness, that gentle mechanical honesty, feels incredible. You start to notice the road again, the weight of the steering, the way the engine clears its throat before settling into a rhythm. You're suddenly more connected, more present, more there than you've been all week. The car demands just enough of your attention to pull you away from the chaos, but not so much that you feel overwhelmed. It's the perfect antidote to modern overload. It's almost funny. Driving an old car forces you to slow down, and somehow you end up arriving faster at yourself. Your shoulders drop, your breathing settles. That problem you were stressing about gets replaced by something far simpler, like, was that noise there yesterday? It's basically meditation, but with carburetors and questionable electrics. Modern cars isolate you. They seal you in a soundproof pod, surround you with screens, and try to protect you from ever feeling any discomfort, physical or emotional. It's efficient, sure, but it's also oddly numbing. Old cars do the opposite. They let the world in, they let you in, they let you feel, hear, sense, and sometimes smell life happening around you. They turn driving from an errand into an experience. And when the pace drops, something else rises: enjoyment. Because you're no longer rushing to get somewhere, you're actually appreciating the process of getting there, the journey everyone keeps talking about, but rarely has time to notice. So yes, old cars might be slower, louder, needy, and slightly dramatic on cold mornings, but they also offer something modern life rarely gives us: a reason to pause, a reason to breathe, a reason to remember that not everything meaningful has to happen at full speed. Sometimes the most satisfying progress is made at 40 miles an hour in the slow lane, in a machine that insists you take the long way, and enjoy every second of it. There's a certain look people give you when you say, with complete sincerity, that old cars are better than modern ones. It's the same look you'd get if you announced you still listen to music on cassettes, or that you've recently taken up medieval blacksmithing, a mix of confusion, amusement, and subtle concern. But here's the thing: old cars are better, and not in the ironic, I liked them before they were cool retro, hipster kind of way. I mean genuinely, experientially, emotionally better. And today I'd like to explain why, gently, reasonably, and with occasional references to cars that have needed therapy more often than servicing. Let's begin. 1. Old cars have soul, and modern cars have software updates. Modern cars are incredible. They can park themselves, avoid collisions, and some of them even apologize when you try to indicate incorrectly. But they do not have soul. They have interfaces. They have warning chimes that sound like your dishwasher finishing a cycle. Compare that to an old Mercedes W123 warming up on a winter morning. There's a smell, a hum, a sense of the car clearing its throat before speaking to you. Or a classic Mini that rattles, vibrates, and cheerfully wobbles its way down the road, like a dog too excited for its own legs. Modern cars glide, old cars live. Modern cars feel like they were designed by committees. Old cars feel like they were dreamt up by slightly mad geniuses with drafting pencils and questionable haircuts. 2. Old cars demand your attention and reward it. Modern cars want you relaxed, distracted, and effectively irrelevant. Most will brake for you, steer for you, and judge you silently through lane assist cameras. Drive something like an old BMW E30, however, and you are suddenly awake. You are listening. You're paying attention to the idle, the feel of the steering, the smell of, is that petrol? Should it smell like petrol? An old car pulls you into the moment by necessity. It's mindfulness, but with more mechanical sympathy. You can't zone out. You can't doom scroll. You can't even sneeze without considering how the carburetor feels about it. And in that strange tactile relationship between human and machine, something happens. You remember what driving is. Not a task, not a commute, not an algorithm. A connection. 3. Old cars teach you character. Modern cars hide it. Modern cars are smooth, predictable, and engineered to feel identical across thousands of units. A Volkswagen today feels like a Volkswagen tomorrow, even if tomorrow's Volkswagen is technically a rebadged Skoda. But old cars, every single one has its own personality, its own backstory, its own grumpy morning habits. Your friend might own the same model year, same spec, same colour, and somehow their heater works and yours doesn't. Your locks freeze, theirs won't unlock after rain. Your dashboard rattles at 40 miles per hour, theirs rattles at 37.5. Every old car is unique. Like snowflakes that rust. A modern car hides its quirks behind layers of electronics and stability control. An old car puts its quirks on loudspeaker and then throws in a bonus squeak from somewhere you haven't identified in 3 years. And the funny thing is, that's what makes them charming. 4. Modern cars are fast. Old cars feel fast. Take almost any modern family hatchback. Let's say a Ford Fiesta. It's quicker than many old sports cars. It corners better. It stops better. It does everything better. And yet, it doesn't feel fast. It feels efficient, like a highly competent appliance. Now get into something from the 70s. A Triumph Spitfire, for example. You do 40 and it feels like 80. You do 60 and it feels like 140. You do 70 and you start bargaining with whichever deity handles structural integrity. In an old car, speed has flavour, wind noise, vibrations, a speedometer that shakes like it's had too much coffee. All of it creates drama. You finish a drive in an old car and feel alive. You finish a drive in a modern car and feel like you've just arrived. 5. Old cars let you participate. Modern cars entertain you. There's a reason people are nostalgic for old Hondas and Toyotas with manual gearboxes. Changing gear yourself is fun. Balancing a clutch is fun. Listening to an engine instead of a synthesized engine noise through speakers is also fun. Modern cars often try to entertain you with huge screens and animated menus. Meanwhile, an old car entertains you by simply being a car. Take something like a classic Subaru. You turn the key, something mechanical happens. The flat 4 burbles, you feel the road. You actually drive, you're not swiping, scrolling, tapping, pairing, updating or rebooting anything. And that simplicity feels like fresh air for the brain. 6. Old cars connect you to people. Modern cars connect to the cloud. You take an old MG Jaguar or Alfa Romeo to a petrol station. You are not filling up. You are starting a conversation. People love old cars. They want to ask about them, share memories, tell you about the one they once had that caught fire, but in a charming way. Modern cars don't start conversations. Modern cars silently upload your data to a server somewhere. Old cars bring out nostalgia. Modern cars bring out update notifications. It's not the same energy. 7. Finally, old cars remind you that joy doesn't need perfection. Modern cars are nearly flawless. Quiet, smooth, efficient, predictable. Old cars are none of those things. And that's exactly why they make us smile. A slightly faded paint job, a bit of patina, a carb that needs persuading on cold mornings, a heater that has 2 settings, sauna and Arctic. These things aren't flaws, they're personality traits. You don't love an old car despite its imperfections. You love it because of them. They remind you of a simple, liberating truth. You don't need everything to be perfect to enjoy it. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones that wobble, leak, squeak, and surprise you, but still carry you home with a grin on your face. So yes, modern cars may have efficiency, safety, technology and comfort. But old cars have heart, and sometimes heart is better than horsepower screens or software. And that's why, yes really, they're better. Every creak, every vibration, every quirk, it all adds up to something modern cars can't replicate. A driving experience that feels alive. Owning a classic car does something subtle to the way you drive. At first, you think you're just learning how to keep an old machine alive, but somewhere along the way, without any formal training or advanced driving courses, your habits start to change, and oddly enough, they tend to make you a better driver. Even when you're back in something modern and sensible, here are 3 of them. The first habit is listening. Classic cars demand it. A modern car filters everything out for you. The noises, the vibrations, the feedback. But an older machine doesn't bother with subtle hints. A slight change in engine note on an old Alfa, a new vibration through the wheel of an MG, or a gearbox that suddenly feels a little less cooperative in a Porsche from the 90s. These are all conversations, and if you ignore them, the car will escalate the discussion. So you learn to listen, to notice, to anticipate, and that habit sticks. You become the kind of driver who feels what the car is doing instead of just reacting when something goes wrong. The second habit is looking further ahead. Classic brakes are, how shall we put this, optimistic. Whether you're in an early Jaguar, a Triumph with a personality, or anything Italian that prefers enthusiasm over urgency, you very quickly learn that last-second decisions are a terrible idea. You start reading the road earlier, you spot traffic building long before it becomes a problem. You leave space, you plan, not because you're being virtuous, but because it's easier than standing on a brake pedal that was designed in another century. And once you've learned that skill, you never really lose it. Even in a modern car with enormous brakes and a dozen safety systems, you're calmer, smoother, and far less rushed. The third habit is mechanical sympathy. Classic cars reward gentleness. They don't like being rushed when they're cold. They don't appreciate aggressive gear changes. And they absolutely remember if you've been unkind to them. So you adapt, you warm things up properly, you shift more smoothly, you drive with intention rather than impatience. Whether it's a softly sprung French saloon, a slightly grumpy British roadster, or an air-cooled Porsche that prefers things done just so, you learn that respect goes a long way. And here's the interesting part, that mindset transfers. You drive modern cars more smoothly, you waste less energy, you feel less stressed, you arrive more relaxed, even if you didn't arrive any faster. So yes, classic cars leak, rattle, and occasionally test your commitment to the hobby, but in return, they quietly train you to be more attentive, more patient, and more aware behind the wheel. Not bad for something with no driver aids, questionable reliability, and an owner's manual that assumes you already know what you're doing. Sometimes the best driving lessons don't come from technology. They come from old machines that simply ask you to pay attention. If you're thinking about your next car, you've probably been told to be sensible, something efficient, something reliable, something that pairs nicely with a spreadsheet. But there's a quiet, rebellious alternative. One that smells faintly of petrol, makes interesting noises, and occasionally asks for patience instead of blind faith. An old and interesting car. And here are 3 reasons why it might be the best decision you'll ever justify to your friends. Reason 1. Old cars have personality. Modern cars are very good, almost suspiciously good. They start every time, isolate you from the outside world, and politely beep if you look like you're having a thought of your own. An older car doesn't do that. It communicates differently. A classic Alfa will tell you how it's feeling through the steering wheel. An MG might rise up theatrically before it's ready to leave. A classic Rolls-Royce won't just go around a corner, it will discuss it with you first. You don't just drive these cars, you negotiate with them, and somehow that makes every journey more memorable. Reason 2. Old cars make ordinary moments feel special. A trip to the shops in a modern car is an administrative task. In something older, it becomes an event. You park a classic Mini or an old Mercedes, and suddenly strangers want to talk to you. People smile. Someone tells you they had one, just like that in 1988, and regrets selling it every day since. Old cars turn errands into stories. They slow you down just enough to notice where you are, what you're doing, and why you bothered leaving the house in the first place. Reason 3. Old cars teach you useful life skills, patience, listening, improvisation, carrying a small but emotionally significant collection of tools. An old Volkswagen or Alfa doesn't break to punish you. It breaks to teach you humility. It encourages you to understand how things work, or at least to develop a healthy relationship with your local mechanic. More importantly, old cars cure you of the illusion that everything should be instant and perfect. They remind you that progress isn't always about speed. Sometimes it's about connection. Now, are old cars practical? Not always. Are they efficient? Rarely. Will they test your optimism at inconvenient moments? Absolutely, but they give cars can't a sense of involvement, a feeling that you're part of the process, not just cargo being moved from one place to another. So if you're choosing your next car, maybe don't ask what's fastest, newest, or most sensible. Ask what will make you smile on a quiet road. What will turn a normal day into a small adventure? What will still be interesting long after the novelty wears off? Because life is already efficient enough. Your car doesn't need to be. There's a quiet bond between people who own classic cars. You can spot it almost instantly. It's not about money or performance figures or even good taste, although we like to pretend it is. It's about shared experiences that make absolutely no sense to anyone else. And there are 3 in particular that only classic car owners truly understand. The first is this: the key turn moment. Modern cars start when you ask them to. Classic cars consider it. There's always a pause, a half second, where the engine thinks about its life choices. You turn the key in an old Alfa Romeo or a Triumph, and you listen, not casually, but with the focus of a bomb disposal expert. Is that a healthy crank? Is that a confident cough? Or is that the sound of today being one of those days? Every start is a small emotional journey, and when it fires into life, you feel a completely unreasonable sense of personal achievement. The second thing only classic car owners understand is the relationship you develop with smells and noises. A faint whiff of fuel in a Jaguar, that's character. A new rattle in an old Porsche, that's a conversation starter. You stop thinking in terms of, is something wrong? And start thinking in terms of, is this noise new, louder, or merely expressive? Your car becomes a living thing with moods, habits, and the occasional tantrum. You don't panic, you diagnose, you negotiate, and sometimes you just turn the radio up and promise to look at it later. And then there's the third thing: strangers. Classic cars turn you into a public service. Petrol stations become social events. Someone will always say, I used to have one of those, even when it's a Renault they very clearly never owned. People will tell you about their uncle's MG, their neighbour's Volvo, or the one that got away in 1987. You'll nod, smile, and listen because you're part of a rolling museum now, whether you like it or not. What's funny is that none of this feels like a burden once you're in it. The quirks, the conversations, the unpredictability, they are the point. Classic car ownership isn't about perfection. It's about participation. You're involved, present, and occasionally late. And that's why classic car owners understand something most people don't. The car isn't just getting you from A to B, it's giving you stories, moments, and a slightly odd but deeply satisfying way of moving through the world. You don't just own a classic car, you enter into an agreement, and somehow, despite everything, you're always happy you did. Owning a British classic car is a bit like living with a polite housemate who smiles warmly, makes excellent tea, and quietly rearranges your life while you're not looking. You think you're in charge, you're not, and if you listen closely, you'll realise your car is plotting against you, not out of malice, but out of tradition. Let's start with the first plot. Number 1, timing. Your British classic has an impeccable sense of when to misbehave. It will never fail on a random Tuesday when you have nothing planned. No, it waits patiently for the exact moment you're heading to a wedding, a long-awaited drive, or somewhere that requires arriving without the scent of petrol and regret. Triumphs, Bristols, old Jaguars, they all share this gift. They'll idle perfectly for weeks, then suddenly decide that today is the day the starter motor feels emotionally unavailable. And the thing is, it won't be dramatic about it. There'll be no bang, no warning light, just silence, as if to say, I'm terribly sorry, but no. The second plot is more subtle. Number 2, confidence erosion. British classics are masters of psychological warfare. One good drive and you feel invincible. You start thinking, I've sorted it now. You tell friends it's actually quite reliable. This is when the car strikes. A minor rattle appears, then a smell, then a noise that wasn't there yesterday and absolutely is there now. Is it serious? Is it nothing? You don't know. That's the point. A Land Rover will convince you that every vibration is either completely normal or the beginning of the end, and you'll never know which. A classic Mini will make you question whether that pull to the left is new or simply part of its personality. You start doubting yourself. The car remains calm. It has done this before. And finally, the most devious plot of all. Number 3, emotional attachment. This is where British classics really get you. Despite everything, the leaks, the quirks, the way a classic Jaguar can turn fuel into noise with astonishing enthusiasm, you fall for it, you forgive it, you defend it. You start using phrases like, they all do that, and it's just a simple fix even though you've said that 6 times already. At some point, you'll catch yourself patting the dashboard of an old Rover or talking gently to an Austin Healey as if encouragement might help. And oddly enough, sometimes it does, or at least it feels like it does. That's when you realise the plot has succeeded. You're no longer an owner, you're a caretaker, possibly an accomplice. But here's the twist. This isn't really sabotage, it's a relationship. British classics don't want efficiency. They don't want speed or convenience. They want attention. They want patience. They want you to slow down, listen, and accept that perfection was never the goal. So yes, your British classic is plotting against you, against your schedule, your certainty, and your spare cash. But it's also plotting for something quieter and better. Fewer rushed journeys, more stories. And the kind of memories you only get from a car that occasionally refuses to cooperate. And honestly, you wouldn't have it any other way. There are many questionable decisions a person can make in life. Buying a British classic car may sit comfortably somewhere between joining a pyramid scheme and cutting your own hair. And yet, if you talk to anyone who actually owns one, they'll tell you it's one of the most rewarding, character-building, occasionally ridiculous choices they've ever made. So today, I want to give you 5 reasons, proper, life-enhancing reasons, why you might need a British classic car in your life. Reason 1, British classics are charmingly imperfect, just like you. A British classic is not afraid to show its quirks. An old MG, for example, will happily reveal its entire emotional landscape through the dashboard. A flickering gauge here, a warning light that comes on only when it feels unappreciated. A Triumph may enthusiastically leak oil, but only because it doesn't believe in bottling up its feelings. And if you ever meet a Jaguar XJ from the 70s, you'll discover a car with the swagger of a rock star and the electrical stability of one too. But here's the magic, their flaws make them lovable. A British classic car teaches you that perfection is overrated. It's the rough edges, the little unpredictabilities that create stories, and in a world obsessed with flawless surfaces and seamless interfaces, there's something deeply comforting about a machine that is still perfectly functional while being gloriously, unapologetically human. Reason 2, they turn every journey into a small adventure. Modern cars make driving feel like background noise. British classics, on the other hand, treat every trip, even a run to the shops, like you're off to scale Everest. Start the engine of a Land Rover Series 2 and you'll feel like you're about to explore a remote corner of Kenya. Even if you're only going to Lidl, take an old Mini onto a back road and suddenly you understand why every motoring journalist becomes slightly hysterical around them. Drive a classic Bentley and you'll find yourself talking in a deeper voice and developing opinions about fine leather. British classics don't simply move you from A to B. They create a sense of occasion. They invite you into the moment, into the sound, the smell, the tactility of driving. They whisper, slow down, enjoy this, notice. If you listen, you realize that driving can be joyful again. Reason 3, owning one is joining an oddly supportive secret society. British classic car ownership comes with a built-in community, one that spans from tiny pub gatherings to enthusiastic online forums where grown adults debate the moral purity of different carburetor setups. Buy a classic Mini and you'll suddenly find middle-aged strangers waving at you in car parks. Own a Rover P6 for 6 minutes and someone will walk up to you and say, "My uncle had one of those. Let me tell you everything about it." Starting in 1974, MG owners appear to be born with a sixth sense. They can smell another MG owner from 500 yards away and will materialize beside you with advice, spare parts, or biscuits. It's a hobby, yes, but also a family. The cheerful, slightly eccentric sort, who show up with tools when your car won't start. You don't just buy the car, you inherit the tribe. Reason 4, you learn patience, resilience, and a questionable kind of optimism. A British classic car will teach you important life skills, not CV skills. Not useful in the corporate world skills, but the real fundamentals, patience. When something works yesterday, but not today. Resourcefulness, when the part you need is out of stock indefinitely. And optimism, when you see a puddle under the car and think, it's probably fine. There's a special kind of self-growth that happens when you try to understand 40-year-old Lucas Electrics, often referred to respectfully as the Prince of Darkness, which should tell you everything you need to know, yet somehow you manage, you adapt, you learn the car's language, you celebrate small victories like a monk achieving enlightenment, and over time you realize the car has made you calmer, more patient, and better at shrugging off life's little inconveniences. Reason 5, British classics have personality, real unapologetic character. This is the biggest reason of all. A British classic car isn't just something you use, it's something you get to know. They have moods, preferences, favourite temperatures, and occasionally strong opinions about weather. An old Austin Healey has the cheeky grin of a mischievous teenager. A Jaguar E-Type has the sultry confidence of someone who knows they look incredible from every angle. A Land Rover Defender has the emotional range of a steel anvil, but a heart of gold. These cars are alive in a way that modern machines simply aren't. And because they have character, they give you character. You become the person who doesn't just drive somewhere, you arrive somewhere, accompanied by the sound of an old engine and a light spray of oil mist. People smile at British classics. They start conversations. They bring nostalgia, joy, curiosity, and a tiny splash of chaos. And let's be honest, the world is better with a bit of chaos in it. So why do you need a British classic car? Not because it's sensible, not because it's practical, but because it adds colour to your life. It slows you down, toughens you up, and makes everyday moments feel cinematic. It gives you stories to tell. It connects you to people you never would have met, and it reminds you, gently, persistently, that life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. A British classic car will frustrate you, enchant you, challenge you, and occasionally leave you stranded. But it will also make you smile in a way almost nothing else can, and if that isn't a good reason to own one, I don't know what is. Classic cars attract many wonderful things: admiration, nostalgia, and unsolicited advice from strangers at petrol stations. They also attract myths, persistent, confident myths, the kind delivered by someone who hasn't owned a classic car since 1987, but feels very strongly about it. So let's gently put a few of these to rest. First myth: classic cars are incredibly unreliable. This one usually comes from someone driving a modern car with 3 warning lights on and a software update pending. The truth is, most classic cars are very honest. A classic Mini, a Triumph, or an old Mercedes will tell you exactly what's wrong, often audibly, sometimes aromatically. Modern cars, by contrast, prefer vague threats and cryptic symbols. Reliability isn't about age, it's about maintenance, sympathy, and occasionally accepting that Italian electrics have personality. Second myth: you have to be rich to own one. Yes, if your idea of a classic car starts with air-cooled Porsche and ends with auction estimate, that might be true, but plenty of classics are wonderfully attainable. An old MG, a Rover, even a slightly scruffy BMW from the 90s can be cheaper to run than a modern finance agreement. The real cost isn't money, it's time, patience, and the willingness to Google things like, why does it only do this when it rains? Third myth: classic cars are terrible to drive. This is usually said by someone who expects a 1970s Alfa Romeo to feel like a new Golf GTI. Classic cars don't isolate you, they involve you. You feel the steering, the road, the decisions you've made in life that led you to this moment. And once you recalibrate, many classics are an absolute joy. There's a reason people still talk about how a Porsche 911 feels, or how delicately a well-sorted MG flows down a country road. Next myth: they're just toys for old men. Yes, there are flat caps, but there are also young owners, artists, engineers, and people who simply like things with character. Classic cars aren't about age, they're about taste, and possibly stubbornness. Anyone who keeps a Lancia running in the modern world is not clinging to the past. They're committing an act of quiet rebellion. Another favourite: classic cars are bad for the environment. This one's more nuanced. Yes, they're not exactly carbon neutral, but most classics do a few thousand miles a year at most. They're repaired, reused, and kept alive rather than scrapped and replaced every 3 years. Sustainability isn't just about what you drive, it's about how often you replace it. A well-loved old Volvo, still going strong, has arguably done its bit. And finally, the biggest myth of all: classic car ownership is stressful. It can be frustrating, yes, but stressful. Only if you fight it. Once you accept that a classic car operates on its own schedule, something shifts, you stop rushing, you listen more, you plan better. In a strange way, these old machines teach you to slow down, and that might be their greatest gift. So maybe classic cars aren't impractical relics after all. Maybe they're reminders that not everything needs to be fast, perfect, or efficient to be worth keeping around. There's a lot of talk these days about electric cars. They're sleek, they're quick, they're silent. A bit too silent, if you ask me. And every week someone asks me, so are you getting an EV yet? And every week I give the same answer, eventually, but not yet, not for the moment. Because here's the thing, I quite like a car that sounds like a car. I'm not ready for something that hums quietly like a very patient washing machine. When I press the start button, I still want a little drama. Maybe a grumble, maybe a cough, maybe a gentle reminder that pistons are doing something vaguely heroic under the bonnet. My friend's Tesla starts with all the emotional expression of a smartphone waking up from a nap. Efficient? Absolutely. Is it thrilling? Only if your definition of excitement is watching a battery percentage climb. Another reason I'm holding off is that I know myself far too well. If I owned an EV today, I'd be checking the range every 8 minutes. I'd become the kind of person who says things like, we can go to the shops, but only if we turn the heater off and drive like a monk. Some people get range anxiety. I'd get range melodrama. And then there's charging. I know it's improving. I know by the time I do buy an EV, it'll probably be seamless. But right now, I still enjoy the simplicity of filling up a tank in 90 seconds. Meanwhile, my friend with a Nissan Leaf spends his life sizing up car parks, like he's hunting for rare Pokemon. Oh look, a charger. Oh wait, it's broken. Oh wait, someone parked a diesel in the space. Oh wait, the charger works, but only when the moon is in the correct phase. I'm not emotionally ready for that kind of quest-based motoring. And then there's just the honesty of it. I like old cars. I like the smells. I like the quirks. I like turning a key instead of pressing a button that makes the dashboard light up like a Christmas tree. When I drive my old Porsche or even a scruffy 90s hatchback, there's a sense of connection, a little mechanical handshake between me and the machine. It's messy, imperfect, wonderfully analog. EVs are brilliant at many things, but messy and imperfect is not their design philosophy. Don't get me wrong, electrics are impressive. The Taycan is basically a spaceship that decided to go to Tesco. The Kia EV6 looks like it was designed by someone who loves triangles. And the Tesla Model 3, well, it's a very efficient way to feel like you're driving a minimalist Scandinavian cupboard. One day I'll get one. I genuinely believe electric cars will be part of my future. But for the moment, just for the moment, I'm staying with the rumbling, slightly leaky, occasionally dramatic world of classic and combustion powered cars, not because EVs are bad, but because I'm to give up the noise, the character, and, if I'm being honest, the joy of a car that communicates constantly, even if some of that communication is help. My gasket's gone again. So yes, I'll join the electric revolution eventually. But right now, I'm enjoying the long, noisy goodbye. There's a strange calm that lives inside every classic car. It's not obvious at first. In fact, it's often hidden beneath rattles, warm oil smells, and the quiet suspicion that something electrical might be having a bad day. But once you spend enough time with an old car, you start to notice it, a kind of calm you don't really find anywhere else. Modern cars are very good at helping you forget you're driving. They insulate you, smooth everything out, and quietly take control, which is impressive, but it also means your mind stays busy elsewhere. In a classic car, that doesn't happen. Whether it's an old Porsche, a slightly dramatic Alfa, or a charmingly unpredictable Citroën, the car keeps you present. You feel the road through the wheel. You hear the engine thinking out loud. You're part of the process. And that's where the calm starts, because when you're paying attention to something real and mechanical, your thoughts stop racing ahead. You're not worrying about tomorrow's to-do list while guiding an old BMW through a corner or waiting for a carburetted engine to warm up properly. The car gently insists that you stay right here in a forceful way, just enough to bring you back. There's also comfort in the honesty of it all. Classic cars don't pretend to be perfect. A Land Rover will tell you exactly how it feels about potholes. A classic Mini will remind you that speed is optional and enthusiasm is not. Even something elegant like a Jaguar has no problem letting you know when it's had enough for the day. And somehow that honesty is soothing. You stop expecting perfection. You stop rushing. You adapt. And then there's the pace. Old cars move through the world differently. They're not in a hurry. And once you accept that, neither are you. You take longer routes, you leave earlier. You arrive calmer. Even a short drive starts to feel like a small event rather than a task to be completed. It's funny, we often talk about classic cars as stressful, temperamental things, and yes, they can be. But inside that unpredictability is a kind of quiet agreement. If you treat the car gently, it will do the same for you. It teaches you to listen, to ease off, to respond rather than react. So maybe the calm inside a classic car isn't something built into the dashboard or hidden under the bonnet. Maybe it's what happens when a machine slows you down just enough to notice where you are, what you're doing, and how good it feels to be fully there. And in a world that's always rushing forward, that kind of calm is quietly priceless. This car comes from a fascinating era in automotive history, an era before reliability was invented, not discovered, not perfected, invented. Back then, manufacturers weren't asking, will this start every morning for 10 years? They were asking far more important questions like, does it feel alive? Does it sound interesting? And can we make this with slightly thinner metal to save a few francs? And honestly, I respect that. I am not talking about a specific car. I am talking about cars from this period, whether it's a Citroën, an Alfa Romeo, a Triumph, or something equally optimistic. These cars were built with a very different philosophy. They weren't designed to be invisible appliances. They were experiences. Occasionally unforgettable ones. Occasionally unforgettable for the wrong reason. You see, modern cars are very good at not involving you. They isolate you from noise, vibration, effort, and responsibility. Old cars do the opposite. They involve you in everything. Every vibration is feedback. Every smell is information. Every new noise is a conversation starter. Take a French classic, for example. A DS21 doesn't break down. It expresses itself. The suspension isn't leaking. It's redistributing hydraulic enthusiasm. The electrics aren't faulty. They're simply having a philosophical disagreement. British cars, of course, have their own charm. A Triumph or an MG doesn't fail. It reminds you that optimism is an essential part of ownership. You don't turn the key expecting certainty. You turn it hoping today is a good day. And when it starts, you feel like you've earned it. Italian cars are even more honest. An Alfa will tell you exactly how it's feeling, usually loudly and at high revs. It may not be reliable, but it will be passionate about it. And if something does fall off, you're almost impressed it stayed on for this long. The thing is, these cars were built before reliability became the goal. Back then, character came first. Engineering was brave, sometimes reckless, occasionally brilliant, and only loosely concerned with the future owner's sanity. And yet, this is the important bit, we forgive them. We forgive the cold starts that feel like negotiations. We forgive the warning lights that don't really warn you of anything. We forgive the way a simple drive somehow becomes a story. Because when a car demands a bit of patience, it gives something back. It slows you down. It makes you pay attention. It turns driving into participation rather than transport. You don't just arrive somewhere, you experience the getting there. So yes, this car was built before reliability was invented, but it was built after charm, personality, and joy had already been perfected, and sometimes that's a trade-off worth making. At first glance, calling a classic car eco-friendly sounds like something said just before being escorted out of a dinner party. After all, these are machines that predate catalytic converters, think fuel economy is a suggestion, and occasionally smell like unburnt optimism. And yet, stick with me, because classic cars might be one of the most quietly sustainable things an enthusiast can own. First, the greenest car is often the one that already exists. Modern cars are marvels of technology, but building them takes an extraordinary amount of energy. Mining materials, manufacturing batteries, shipping parts across the planet, and assembling everything in vast factories. A classic car, on the other hand, is already here. The carbon cost was paid decades ago. Keeping a 1970s Porsche 911 or a classic Mercedes W123 on the road isn't consumption, it's preservation. It's recycling at a grand mechanical scale. Instead of scrapping and replacing, you maintain, repair and reuse. You're not chasing the latest upgrade, you're making something old last longer. Environmentally speaking, that's surprisingly virtuous. Second, classic cars encourage moderation. No one daily drives a 40-year-old Alfa through rush hour traffic without a strong sense of self-reflection. Classics tend to come out for weekends, sunny evenings, or special occasions. They're driven less, cared for more, and appreciated deeply. That alone dramatically reduces their environmental impact. A lovingly maintained Mazda MX-5 from the 1990s, doing a few thousand miles a year, is hardly the climate villain it's made out to be, especially compared to a brand new SUV doing short trips to the shops while carrying nothing but a reusable bag and mild guilt. Third, classic cars resist the culture of disposability. Modern ownership often follows a simple pattern: buy, use, trade in, repeat. Classic car ownership flips that entirely. You form a relationship. You learn its habits. You repair rather than replace. You rebuild rather than discard. A Toyota Land Cruiser that's been running for 30 years isn't just transport. It's proof that durability is environmental responsibility. A Honda engine that keeps going with basic maintenance is a quiet protest against planned obsolescence. These cars weren't designed to be fashionable for 3 years. They were designed to endure. And yes, let's talk about the word investment. Not every classic car is going to fund your retirement, and that's probably for the best. But many classics hold their value precisely because they're not being churned through a rapid consumption cycle. A well looked after BMW E30 or early MX-5 isn't a depreciating appliance. It's a long-term asset that rewards care, patience and restraint. So no, classic cars won't single-handedly save the planet. They still burn fuel, they still make noise, and they still occasionally drip oil in a way that feels personal. But they represent something modern life is desperately short on: longevity, repairability, and respect for what already exists. In a world obsessed with the new, the fastest, and the disposable, choosing to preserve and enjoy an old machine might be one of the most quietly eco-friendly decisions you can make. Plus, it looks better than a spreadsheet. You're listening to Classic Car Radio. If you want some quiet thoughts in the background, you're in the right place. There are plenty of complicated ways to feel better in life. Meditation apps, cold plunges, inspirational quotes from people who definitely wake up earlier than you. But there's one mood booster nobody talks about, mostly because the people who know are too busy trying to find parts on eBay: the classic car. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can something built in the 70s with the structural integrity of a sandwich and the reliability of a French electrical system improve your mood? Well, let me give you 3 very solid, very scientific reasons, or at least 3 reasons that work for me. Reason 1, classic cars make you feel like the main character. Drive a modern car and you're basically piloting a dishwasher with headlights. Drive a classic and suddenly you're starring in your own film. A Citroën DS makes you feel like a time-travelling diplomat. A Triumph TR6 convinces you you're more charming than you actually are. And a Porsche 928, well, that just makes you feel like you should have a yacht, even if the closest thing you actually have is a kayak from Decathlon. There's something magical about the way old cars look, smell and sound. They give you instant character development. Even your bad hair days look intentional when you're climbing out of a 1970s Alfa Romeo. Reason 2, classic cars force you to slow down, and slowing down feels good. It's impossible to be stressed while driving a Morris Minor. The car simply won't allow it. Try rushing and it will respond by quietly shaking its head and possibly removing a piece of itself in protest. Modern cars make everything too easy. Half the time you don't even feel like you're driving, you're supervising. But an old car demands your attention in a way that pulls you out of your head and into the moment. You have to listen, feel, and occasionally bargain with it. And in that process, everything else, deadlines, notifications, the existential dread of why did Sharon schedule another meeting, fades away. It's mechanical mindfulness, but with better smells. Reason 3, classic cars create tiny adventures. Without even trying, you don't take a classic out just to buy milk. You take it out because maybe the sun is out, maybe you finished work early, or maybe you're feeling particularly brave and want to see if the old electrics are in a cooperative mood. Even a simple 5-mile drive becomes a story. Maybe you meet someone at the petrol station who used to own the exact same MGB, but in mustard yellow. Maybe someone gives you a thumbs up, which counts as more social interaction than you usually get in a week. Or maybe, just maybe, everything works perfectly, and you spend the whole journey grinning like a child because your 40-year-old Volvo hasn't made a single alarming noise. Classic cars transform the ordinary into the slightly ridiculous, the slightly magical, and the definitely memorable. And that's good for the soul. So yes, they break, they leak, they squeak, and occasionally they demand rituals you can't explain to normal people. But they'll also lift your mood faster than any wellness practice I've ever tried. Because when you're behind the wheel of something old, whether it's a Beetle, a Jag, or some questionable French masterpiece held together by enthusiasm and rust, the world feels lighter. You feel lighter, and sometimes that's all the therapy you need. There are many wonderful things about owning a British classic car. The charm, the history, the way strangers nod approvingly at you in car parks, as if you've done something noble for your country. But before you buy one, there are a few things people tend not to mention, not because they're trying to hide them, more because British classic owners have accepted their fate and no longer see anything unusual about it. So here are 3 things nobody tells you, but probably should. Number 1, you will smell permanently of petrol. This is not a metaphor, it's a lifestyle. Somewhere, deep inside the soul of a British classic, whether it's an old MGB, a Triumph Spitfire, or a slightly too confident Jaguar XJ6, there is a faint but persistent desire to perfume its owner. You step out of the car after a lovely drive, take a deep breath, and there it is, that unmistakable blend of petrol, old leather, and maybe the ghost of a previous owner's pipe smoke. You'll think you've imagined it. Your friends will assure you that you haven't. And eventually you'll stop trying to get rid of the smell and simply accept that it's part of your personal brand. Number 2, electrical issues are a bonding exercise. Some people say the British invented romance. I say they invented character, building wiring looms. If you own anything with the words Lucas anywhere near it, you're not just a driver, you're in a long-term relationship with the Prince of Darkness himself. One day the indicators work, the next day they're on a spiritual retreat. Your headlights may or may not join you. But here's the thing, Every time you fix something, or jiggle a connector, or threaten the car with a multimeter, you feel genuinely proud. Modern cars don't give you that. They give you error codes and judgment. A classic gives you opportunities for personal growth. And number 3, the real thrill isn't the driving, it's the starting. Every British classic owner knows that sacred moment. You sit down, turn the key, and hold your breath. Will it fire up instantly, like an enthusiastic Austin Mini on a sunny day? Or will it cough, think about life, and then decide that today is not the day? That moment, that glorious, unpredictable, slightly anxious moment, is the true heartbeat of British motoring. When it does start, you feel victorious. When it doesn't, you shrug because you've packed tools. You always pack tools. You could be going to the shops for milk, and you'll have a toolkit in the boot, just in case your Triumph decides it fancies a roadside picnic. But here's the secret. These 3 things point to British classics aren't perfect, and we don't want them to be. The little quirks, the smells, the gremlins, they're all part of a relationship that feels alive. Modern cars do everything flawlessly, and somehow that's less interesting. A classic gives you stories, it gives you character, it gives you a mild but constant sense of adventure. So yes, nobody tells you these 3 things, but once you've lived with a British classic, you wouldn't trade them for anything, except maybe a lift home when the starter motor gives up. There's a funny thing that happens when you spend time with an old car. You start off thinking you're the one looking after it, keeping it running, coaxing it through its quirks, forgiving it for the odd rattle or drip. But eventually you realize something else is going on. The car is teaching you something too. And one of its favorite lessons is this: slow down. Classic cars don't rush. They can't. They were born in a time before instant everything, before touch screens, notifications, and the strange modern belief that faster is always better. When you drive an old machine, you feel that difference immediately. There's a certain unhurried rhythm to the way it warms up, wakes up, and decides whether it's in the mood to cooperate today. And if you try to push it, it will remind you, gently or not, that patience is part of the deal. What's surprising is how quickly that patience becomes a pleasure. Because when you're in a classic, you're not just travelling through space, you're travelling through time. You're driving something built with hands, not algorithms. You start listening more closely to the engine, noticing small changes, paying attention to the behaviour of the gearbox or the weight of the steering. Without even realising it, you drop out of the mental rush of the day and into something far more grounded. It's a bit like a moving meditation, not the sit cross-legged on a cushion type, but the sort where your attention is anchored to the sound, the feel, the moment right in front of you. You can't drive a classic car while doom scrolling or worrying about 10 different emails. It demands your presence, and that presence becomes a kind of refuge. There's also a humility to it. Classic cars have no interest in your schedule. They don't care about the meeting you're late for or the message you haven't answered. They operate on their own timeline with their own temperament. And once you accept that, life gets a bit lighter. You stop fighting the clock. You stop trying to force everything. You breathe a little more. And in that space, you rediscover something modern life quietly stole. The simple joy of driving for its own sake. A slow cruise. A long corner taken with care. The sensation of being connected to a machine that asks you to participate, not just sit there. It reminds you that moving slowly isn't the opposite of progress. Sometimes it's the only way to feel where you're actually going. So yes, old cars break and fuss and throw the occasional tantrum, but along the way they also teach us how to let go, how to pay attention, and how to enjoy the journey instead of sprinting from one destination to the next. In their own stubborn, charming way, classic cars show us a truth we tend to forget. You don't have to live fast to live well. Sometimes the best moments are found in the slow lane. Whenever I'm around classic cars, I'm struck by this quiet realization. Every old engine you see has lived more life than most of us ever stop to notice. We look at these machines as objects, as hobbies, as projects to fix on a Sunday. But somewhere in the metal, in the noise, in the wear and tear, there are stories tucked away. Sometimes I think that's what draws us to them, not the horsepower or the rarity, but the history